Well, I think it's about time we had one of those weird tube line proposals that never got built and frankly probably wouldn't have been a great idea anyway. Did you know that there was a proposal in the 1920s to run tube trains all the way from Sutton to Watford? For my non-London chums, Sutton is a place in South London way out in the suburbs. Watford is way off to the north of London in Hertfordshire. Neither of those places are on the Underground, so how on earth did those crazy fools at London Underground propose to do this? Well, let me give you a bit of context. The organisation behind all this was the Underground Electric Railways Company of London, or UERL for short. It should probably be UERCL, but no one calls it that. UERL had been formed to modernise what's now the District Line, as well as to build the Piccadilly, Bakerloo and the Hampstead lines. If the Hampstead line doesn't sound familiar, it is this one. Officially it was the Charing Cross, Euston and Hampstead Railway, but I'm not going to keep saying that, we'll be here all day. In 1913 they'd also acquired the Central London Railway, now the Central Line, and the City and South London Railway. Following a break for the First World War, UERL had connected the Hampstead Line and the City and South London Railway together to form the Northern Line. This was completed in 1924. Actually, it wasn't called the Northern Line back then. The two lines were physically joined, but still considered to be two separate entities. They'd officially been named the Northern Line in 1937. But while UERL were working on not the Northern Line, in 1922 they'd made a proposal that would go even further. See, they'd noticed that joining the not yet Northern Line up took pressure off the Bakerloo line, so why not bring in a third? The thinking was this: the Hampstead line and the Bakerloo line met at Waterloo, so build a junction there. This would offer an incredible array of options for services. So, what's all this about Sutton and Watford? Well, at that time the Bakerloo line ran all the way to Watford Junction. This service lasted until 1982, at which point it was cut back to Stonebridge Park, then a couple of years later it was extended again to Harrow and Wealdstone. Back in the 1920s it was still operational. That is how trains could get to Watford. Sutton, though, is a little more complicated. See, in the early 1920s, what I'm going to call the Northern Line for simplicity's sake only went as far as Clapham Common. It also didn't go to High Barnet or Mill Hill East, but we'll ignore that for now. UERL wanted to extend south, all the way to Sutton. Oh, and this scheme would have brought yet another line in. See, it had actually started out as a proposal to extend the District Line. The Northern Line would join it at Morden and continue on all the way to Sutton. As far as I'm aware, there were no plans to combine these two lines. Basically, it would have just been a case of those two lines sharing their track for a bit. You couldn't, for instance, get a Northern Line train to Barking, and District Line trains were too large for the Northern or Bakerloo tunnels. The resulting line would have been pretty complicated. 2 termini in the south, 2 in the north, 3 different north to south lines, 4 junctions. That's assuming we didn't get the Bakerloo line's later branch to Stanmore, or the Northern Line's branches to Mill Hill East, High Barnet or Battersea Power Station. And navigating stations like Waterloo, Embankment, Elephant and Castle and Charing Cross would be an even bigger nightmare than it currently is. The problem from an operational standpoint is that the more complicated you make a line, the more potential there is for things to go wrong. A problem on one section of line can impact the whole thing. In fact, we can see this on the Northern Line we have today. Camden Town Junction is a fearsomely difficult junction to operate, with lines going off in 4 directions. A problem at Camden messes everything up. Later tube lines, the Victoria and the Jubilee, are straightforward from one end to the other with no branches. There have been calls to separate the Northern Line back into 2, but at the moment, unravelling the lines is more trouble than it's worth. But that's not why this didn't go ahead. The usual reasons for these grand plans not going ahead is money, but it wasn't that either. The main reason was the mainline railway companies. Sutton was the territory of the London, Brighton and South Coast Railway, who vigorously opposed any railway in that direction. In fact, they were even afraid that UERL planned to extend services all the way down to Brighton, which is a terrifying concept if you're the sort of person who falls asleep on the tube home. In 1923, the London, Brighton and South Coast were absorbed by the Southern Railway, who remained opposed. UERL eventually came to the agreement that they would only go as far as Morden, and the Southern Railway could build the loop from Wimbledon to Sutton. It now forms part of the Thameslink Sutton Loop. The Southern Railway were also opposed to the junction at Waterloo, and that's largely because they were planning to dig their own tunnels under Waterloo. That might make a video in itself. Anyway, as the owners of Waterloo Station, they felt that they had priority here. The Old Vic Theatre, very near to Waterloo, also raised objections. The plans indicated that construction would have taken place right next to the theatre. A petition was organised and put to Parliament. Basically, it seemed that apart from UERL, no one wanted this junction at Waterloo, and without that junction, the scheme would have to be abandoned. Waterloo had met its Waterloo. That wasn't quite the end of it, though. In the 1930s, the Northern Heights programme was authorised. This was a massive programme of expansion at the northern end of the Northern Line. In fact, that's why the Northern Line is called the Northern Line, despite the fact that, famously, it's not the line that goes furthest north, but it is the line that goes furthest south. Anyway, among the many works going on, the line would have been extended from Edgware to Bushey Heath. Then the longer-term plan was to extend the relatively short distance from Bushey Heath to Watford. So that's another parallel universe that could have sent Northern Line trains to Watford. This also wasn't the last time the idea of connecting the Bakerloo and Northern lines would be considered. But that's another story. Well, I do hope you enjoyed this Bakerloopy tale from the tube. If you did, please do leave a like and consider subscribing for more. Today's main sources were the Hampstead Tube by Anthony Badsey Ellis and the Bakerloo Line by Mike Horn. I would like, as ever, to thank my donors on Ko-fi, on Patreon, and here on YouTube for your generous support. You are the Waterloo to my Bakerloo Line. And I shall see you all again very soon. Cheerio.